do when your best opening story lands like a thud? When your surefire icebreaker melts before it hits the room? On today's show, we'll break down how to read the room, adjust without overreacting, bring life back to a dead audience without losing your confidence or composure. And I got just the guest to help us do that. Ready? Let's go. Let me tell you a little bit about today's guest, Ben Gay III. He is the author of 25 books on the subject of selling and living successfully. He has over 50 years in professional selling. He's been professionally speaking for over 60 years and has given 5,000 plus paid events, and he claims about that many more at no charge for schools, prisons, charities, etc. I'm going to let him take it from here because he'll do a better job of telling you his journey than I will. Welcome to the show, Ben Gay III. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, Rob, first of all, thank you for having me. That was a pleasure. We're becoming old friends via Zoom.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. The among the things that you told me we'd be discussing is how, when the audience isn't right and so on, what do you do about it? I do a lot of prior stuff. When I speak somewhere, I'm in the room first. I usually am waiting for the janitor or whomever to unlock the door because I want to get in there early and look around and own the room. When the people start showing up, they're coming into my room and I'm there to welcome them. And by the time I talk to enough of them, when I get on stage, I'm talking to friends, people I've met, talked to, etc. If I'm more comfortable in front of 10 or 15,000 people that I know, even I obviously haven't met every single one of them, but I've been available to them, waving, nodding, shaking hands, swapping stories for maybe 30 minutes or more before I was officially introduced. So I'm more comfortable there than I am in my own living room talking to Gigi's relatives. I don't have any relatives out here, but I live in a town where her family's been here for 100 years. She was born and raised here. Everybody in town knows her. We were leaving a restaurant one day. You get a kick out of this, Rob, because you have, like I do, some fame, at least in our business. But when I married Gigi, she made me promise no local seminars, no seminars within 50 miles of home. I said, how far away is Lake Tahoe? Well, Gigi's my third wife, although we've been together 30 some odd years, but she knew my first two wives, was raised with one, became good friends with the other just because we all lived in close proximity. So she said, yes, I love you. Yes, I want to marry you, but we need to talk. And I went, what's that mean? Well, what it meant was no seminars within 50 miles of home. I said, how far away is Lake Tahoe, which is right up the road, and I've done a lot of work up there, people flying in for conventions and so on. She said, well, that's 50 miles away, just under 50 miles away. I said, so that's okay? She said, that's fine. And no local clients. Well, we live in the little town of Placerville, California, where gold was discovered in 1849, and nothing of significance has happened since. So I looked up and down Main Street. I didn't see anybody who's going to pay me the kind of money I make speaking. So I let that one go. And gleefully.
Yeah.
I said all that to say this. We're leaving a restaurant one day, and I'm used to having people go, that's been gay. That's been, and nothing as usual. And as we passed one table, uh, a lady said to her dining companion, "That's Gigi Ronzoni. Ronzoni's her maiden name. That's Gigi Ronzoni and her husband, and we don't know what he does or who he is." And I thought, first I was, for a split second, I was insulted. And then I thought, this is good.
Yeah.
I don't have to put on the tuxedo to go get a hamburger.
Right. You don't have to be on to go get a hamburger. You can just be somebody else
Um,
walking in there. That's just,
that's right.
it's funny. With me, Ben, it's the opposite. My wife has always wanted me to try and find more work within 50 miles because I've got
Oh,
about
yeah.
3 million in the air. And I know at least one gig I saw you at, your wife was there with you, but I travel alone. And so it's a little bit different with me, but I think that's hysterical.
Yeah, and it's fun because it's like nobody cares, but
Right.
I get to play the game of, don't you know I'm famous? You know,
Haven't you heard of the closers? 10
yeah,
million books. Come on, folks.
I won't
Psst,
let the local bookstore sell it. They've tried
really?
to buy it. No, it's just something else. I've enjoyed the anonymity.
Isn't that
Whenever I'm
interesting?
standing outside, you know how women park us?
Yep.
I'm going to go in here, you stand here.
Right.
I'm parked on Main Street in Placerville, and the guy comes along, and I talk to everybody, you know, hi, how are you? Good to see you. And so this guy comes along, and he's obviously homeless, or he's not doing well. And I said, how you doing? And he said, I'm fine. And he stopped to talk. And we chatted for a minute. And I asked him if there's anything I could do for him. He said, no. So I wasn't going to force $10 on him. He said, no, he was fine. And as he started to leave, he patted me on the shoulder and said, hang in there, bud. I'm homeless too. And when Gigi came out of the wherever she was, I said, you know, I may have to work on my wardrobe.
Yeah. I'm still struggling with this 50-mile radius thing, but okay. I think we got a little work to do on it. Listen, you're a master at closing, but I've watched your work. It's funny you mentioned that when he comes in early, it's his room. I've walked into his room before, and believe me, it's his room. I'm just you got
No.
to follow Ben Gay the third. You better have your act together. What I'm curious about is this, and we connected last week because I had written something on LinkedIn and I'd mentioned I use a video. It kind of takes the temperature of the room. But
Mhm.
you have your own unique opening that centers around your name that really does take the temperature of the room. Talk to us about that for a moment, and then tell me what do you do when you don't get the reaction you're looking for?
Super. I work harder.
Yeah.
I go, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Also, an aging, a young crowd, and I'm aging. I
Right.
said something about Bob Hope one day,
Yeah.
and a lady who was, it was a question answer thing, and she said, "Excuse me, I'm taking notes and all. Who is Bob Hope?"
Right.
And I said, well, you
Yeah.
know, USO, comedian, movies, and television. She said, I'm gonna go home and Google that.
It's
So I thought to myself, you got to be careful. You
oh
know,
yeah. Hey
I
Ben,
refer.
let me tell you a quick story about that. And we're going to talk sales a little bit about sales right now, but you know how with a lot of times we're trying to get people to see, the end in mind. Have the end in mind. When you're asking questions, think about the end in mind. And I said, you know who's great at that? Columbo. And so I took an old Columbo video over the holidays. I actually started with the end of him arresting the guy and then saying, it was the little things. And then I spliced in
Yeah,
all those questions. Where do you put your mail? Things like that.
yeah.
And I got to tell you, I was smiling ear to ear. And when it got done and I brought the lights up, I had the same thing. It looked like a bunch of ghosts out there. And somebody put up there and said, who's Columbo? It
Yeah,
happens. It
you got to
happens.
be cautious. Well,
So when you get up there and what Ben does is he starts working with his name a little bit. I mean, it's the elephant in the room. This guy is coming up his name Ben Gay the third. Okay. Walk us walk us through. I don't want you to do the whole thing, but kind of give us the shortened version of how you out that name and then Tell me what happens when it thuds a little bit.
Well, a couple little things are important. I'm first in the room. I'm meeting people. I'm talking to
Hmm.
friends. I've done some of the work that doesn't. I don't walk into a room full of strangers and start popping jokes.
Right.
I walk into a room of friends,
Right.
and I'm preceded by an introduction that I have written. And when the guys, I've had them say to me, "Oh, that's okay. I'll just wing it." And I said, "No,
Mhm.
if you want me to come up on stage when you call out my name, it will be right after you have read this word for word. Get familiar with it now. Don't want you winging it. This is not a game to me. This is a business. So you'll read my introduction." So that builds a little bit of respect if I didn't already have it, if I wasn't known to this particular group. The introduction has been carefully crafted over many years and many presentations. And then when I finally take the stage, the introduction is so good that I hardly ever don't get a standing ovation, or at least a sprinkle. Maybe not everyone's standing, but most of them are. You could legitimately call it a standing ovation. And then when I take the microphone and turn to them, I say, and this is scripted. I know scripting is a horrible word, but all of us who are professionals use them all the time.
Right. Not
Whether
when we know it real well. It's just fine because it doesn't
that's
sound like a script. Keep going.
Yeah, yeah. People say I don't like scripting. I said if it's done well, you don't recognize the script. And if you've been in selling over 30 days, you're on a script. You tend to say the same thing
Yeah.
over and over and over again. The question is it a good script? Is it a tested script? Is it
Right.
proven? Is it effective? So I turn to them and I go, all right, uh, first, let's get this Ben Gay thing out of the way. And that's my first probe, in addition to meeting as many as I could individually. That's my first probe. And I have noticed from time to time that not all the young people know about Ben Gay. I guess they don't promote it every time I see a Ben Gay commercial on television, on the news, I go, yes, thank you. You just told, some of the channels I watch are very popular news programming. And I go, you just told several million people there's a product called Ben Gay. I don't care about the sales of their product. I care about people understanding the joke when I tell it.
Right.
So let's get this Ben Gay thing out of the way. They laugh, and I'm listening. And what I'm listening for, Rob, is did they roar? In which case, I could just loosen up my tie and go, okay. As Sammy Davis Jr. used to say, scripted. Let's play house.
Right.
This is going to be different than all the other performances I've ever done. I used to take people up to Tahoe as a contest prize to watch Sammy when he appeared there, and he would do Candyman and whatever his hits were. He only had one hit,
Right.
Candyman, although he's known for a lot of other stuff. But he would say the management wants you out on the floor gambling, but you've been so kind to me right off the bat that, and he would loosen his tie, sometimes take his jacket off and throw it on the side. He said, let's play house, meaning you're a special group. I'm not going to be watching my clock. I don't care whether you gamble or not. And with the people I took up were always salespeople. I'd say, look at your watch. He was supposed to be on for, 60 minutes, let's say. And they'd look at their watch, and 60 minutes later, on the second, he was done and off the stage.
Right.
The whole thing, let's play house, everything was scripted. He knew, and I've seen him probably 50 times. I've only seen one show, but I've seen it 50 times.
Mm.
And I enjoyed it every time because he was so good at it.
Right.
If we have time, I have a Judy Garland story that fits in that thing. So I say, Ben Gay, they laugh. And then I say, it's actually worse than that. It's Benjamin Franklin Gay the Third. Now you go through life with that name and so on. And I said, so being a Southerner, we like to name. I have friends who have grandkids now. One Bob Talbert the Sixth. and we like to name our people. So I wanted to name our oldest boy Ben Gay the fourth, and my wife said, not Gigi, who you met, but my first wife, who's passed away, said, I don't want to do that because he'll, and keep in mind, I'm talking to an audience now. It
Right.
sounds like you and I are talking, but
Right,
I'm
right,
talking
right.
to
Okay,
the,
keep going. Yeah.
yeah, uh, the, the grief you've been through with Ben Gay in the Coast Guard at mail call, last name first, first name last. So I'm Gay Ben. I,
Right.
I, I used to hope I didn't get letters. Um, so she said, I don't want him to have to go through all that. So we went back and forth. Ben Gay the fourth. What do we name him after one of her relatives or something? I said, no, no. So we finally compromised and we named him Absorbing Junior. Now there's one that has started to age a bit.
Yeah.
They still sell it in the stores,
I've
but
I've heard you do it, and I had my head in my hands because I went, I'm a dead man. How do you follow this guy? uh, because the audience was roaring. And Ben, can I tell you something else? This is the funny
sure.
thing about you. You do things that are very subtle, and I like slowing you down a little bit. You said something that was very important, and I'm looking at him going, that's what makes him who he is. Every time I pushed you and said, get to the open, show me what you do. How you worn that out? How do you know about this audience? You said at least 3 times, wait a minute. I get in before anybody. I'm meeting these people. I'm greeting these people. So where most speakers are saying, how do I take the stage and win the audience? Ben Gay the third is telling us, we'll get there in a moment. You want to win the audience? Get in there before the audience and just slowly, like a little wave, just let
Yep.
them kind of ease their way to you. Sometimes it's a little intimidating walking up to a Ben Gay the third, but if you just come in nice and easy, there aren't that many people. So Ben is already laying the foundation for trust before that intro gets read, and I think that's critical, and I think that's
Yep.
beautiful. And we don't talk about that enough.
It makes it so much easier. I think why wouldn't everybody do it? Rob, I've been in this business since night speaking. I started doing well, so at the Saturday morning sales meeting, Ben, get up and tell them what you did, or how you do it. So although I didn't get paid right off the bat, it took me a few months to figure out that people actually got paid. I saw my sponsor in Holiday Magic Cosmetics. I worked for 6 hours in front of this group. Zig came in. He had joined the same business on the same day in the same meeting that I had joined in. Zig came in. He was 18 years older. He was in the Navy the day I was born. I consider us both equal in age, but I didn't. When you're that young, age doesn't make as much difference. He didn't
Right.
have any gray hair yet or anything, but Zig worked for an hour, and I saw he went to the back of the room. He was leaving. He had to get back to South Carolina, and I saw Bill Dempsey, our sponsor, reach in his coat pocket, pull out an envelope, and hand it to Zig. Zig took it, put it in his coat pocket. So I was wrapping up. Whoever followed me came up, and I almost ran behind Zig. There was a little coffee shop in the building. And I said, Zig, we haven't gotten to talk since the day we joined. Let me buy you a cup of coffee. So we went in there, and I said, just to keep him honest, what did Bill pay you? And he reached in his coat pocket, opened up he says, well, I know what he's supposed to have paid me. Opened up the envelope. He said, yeah, $300. This is 1965. We were happy to get $300.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, $300. How much did he pay you? And I said, the same. I didn't even know people could get paid for talking.
Right.
I was going to do it anyway,
Right.
but I had just given, except for churches, prisons, etc., I had just given my last free speech. So
Wow.
Zig and I started at 300. Earl Nightingale was roughly there. He went to 1500. We went to 1500,
Right.
and so on. And one day, Earl went to some other figure, and I said, Earl, it was sort of surprising to me you could make that much money giving a speech. I said, why are you raising your price? He said, I'm a radio guy, a studio man. I hate public speaking. I'm trying to find a price at which they won't hire me.
That's great. And by the way, when Ben's mentioning Zig, just so everybody knows, we're talking about the great Zig Ziglar here.
Yeah,
And it's funny. I still have my Prime the Pump tape.
I
I think it's
carried
a
that
collector's
stupid.
item. I love
I
that.
carried that stupid pump into. I had a deal with Zig because he was better than I was, especially when we started. I think I was more substantial as I began to grow, but he was still doing biscuits, fleas, and pump handles, or pump
Right.
handle biscuits and fleas, whatever it was. His three most famous stories. So I said to Zig, "Here's the deal," because we were sort of traveling in the same circuit. I said, "I will carry your pump in. You shouldn't be seen hauling that pump around." And in the beginning, it was a iron pump, like for real.
Right.
Later, he got the famous stainless steel one that had never had water in it. But his first pump was for real. I
Right.
said, "You shouldn't be doing that. You don't see a star unload the station wagon and get out the drum set. You should walk in." And I said, "I will carry it for you in exchange for front row seat. I don't have to pay to get in, front row seating, and a lunch before or dinner afterwards where I get to ask you things." He said, "Deal." And I must have hauled that pump into 50 meetings
Wow.
before I finally said, "Zig, I got it.
Right.
You're on your own."
Yeah.
But Zig and I answered the same ad Wednesday, September 15th, 1965, in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I don't know how Zig's interaction was. I called, answered an ad from a phone booth, and Bill Dempsey answered the phone, our sponsor. And I said, "Hi, I'm Ben Gay, Brown Gay Food Brokerage Company," which was a semi big deal in Atlanta. And we remember the East Lake Country Club and so on. So it carried a little weight. I didn't mention that I wasn't the gay in Brown Gay Food Brokerage. I was Ben Gay, a retail detail salesman working for my father, being paid $100 a week to do it. So I began qualifying Bill Dempsey to see if he was worthy of hiring me. I was actually looking for a job, but I couldn't find anything in the warrant ads I knew how to do. So I had to go over to business opportunities. Didn't know what that was. And this little ad said, "If you know anything about marketing plans and want to make more money, dial this number." So I went in a phone booth outside of a grocery store I just called on, dialed the number, dialed to your younger people, dialed the number.
I can hear the clicking. Yes. We don't even have push buttons yet. This is a
No,
real rotary phone. Yeah.
dialed. And put in my dime or whatever it was in those days. And so I began qualifying Dempsey. And finally he said, "Mr. Gay, pardon me for interrupting. I'm not the man standing in a phone booth answering want ads. If you'd like to talk to me, where are you now?" And I told him, right where Peachtree and West Peachtree split.
Mhm.
He said, "You're about 3 blocks from my office. Be standing in front of my desk in 10 minutes or never dial this number again." And he hung up, folks, hung up.
Right.
Heavy receiver slammed down on the thing. And 10 minutes later, I was standing in front of his desk. I made it to his receptionist just at the 10th minute. Zig and I and my running buddy, my partner, Jimmy Rucker, went in, heard the presentation, and for $91.41, we could be distributors of Holiday Magic Cosmetics. I remember that number because that's exactly the amount of money I didn't have. So I had to borrow 9141 from Rucker. I was married, he wasn't. I said, "You're not married, you don't have anybody to support." And I knew what he was making. We both
Right.
made the same thing.
Right.
After taxes, it was about 9141. So we took his check and got into the business. 2 years later, because I learned how to speak, that was I sort of knew how to sell. I've been selling since I was 10. But I added speaking to that talent list. And 2 years after I turned over the 9141, I was president of the company, and Zig worked for me and everybody else in the company, which became internationally, grand total, a million person sales organization
Wow.
doing, adjusted for inflation, uh, about 3.5 billion with a B dollars a year, and I was 25 and couldn't balance my own checkbook, but I could speak and I could sell,
Right.
and I've been riding that pony ever since. The Getting back to the audience again, I try and make some local or audience reference among the people I've met. I go, I was talking to Bob over here, and I
Right.
point to Bob, and I was talking to Bob, and he told me this about you guys,
Right.
and it was something light and humorous.
Right.
And Jim here was standing there, he agreed, and I point to Jim. I pick out 5 or 6 people in the audience. So when you say, have they ever died on you? It reminds me of another story. Here's death. I was, I talked to lots of group, 400 in Atlanta, and became the Southeastern Regional something or other. So audiences were creeping up. But then they asked me to go to New York and address an audience up there. And I said, sure. I didn't say how many, what's the subject or anything. I said, sure. So I go up, walk into the room from a side door because they said they're starting to introduce you. Oh, that day I had had lunch with Ern Westmore. Your audience doesn't know who that is, but the Westmore brothers were the makeup kings of Hollywood. And the company had hired Ern Westmore as our director of beauty and fashion. And he'd appeared on a very popular daytime talk show doing makeovers and so on, the Art Linkletter show. When I told my mother I had had lunch with Ern Westmore, she said, no, you haven't. I said, yes, I did. I just had lunch at the Carnegie Deli. She said, you may have eaten at the Carnegie Deli, but not with Ern Westmore. I said, Mom, he's now a friend of mine. So anyway, Ern had asked me if he could introduce me. And I said, oh, I'd be honored. He said, you're following me. I know. And so I walk into this room and I look around. It's the ground floor and 2 balconies, 5,000 people. I don't think I'd ever in person seen that many people in one place in my
Big
life.
room. Yeah.
And he's up on stage saying, and then I met a guy today, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, okay, I could just moonwalk. I didn't say moonwalk in those days. It was called the glide, by the way. It's a burlesque thing. I could just do the moonwalk out of this room, claim that I couldn't find it or I was sick or something. I was petrified. But by then, about the time that thought crossed my mind, a spotlight hit me. Somebody was bright enough to be looking for the next speaker. A spotlight hit me, and 5,000 sets of eyes looked at me. There's no escape now.
Yeah.
So I walked over, it was about 6 steps up to the podium. And as Ern is saying, and now a man I had lunch with today, who I sincerely believe is going to be a big deal in this company. It's my pleasure to present to you, Benjamin Franklin Gay the third. And before the D was finished on third, Ern dropped dead on stage. I don't mean fainted. Looked like he'd been shot with an elephant gun. Boom, and he went down. And the spotlight's on me, and I'm on about the 5th step. There's no turning back. So I said, one of the early wireless mics on me. I said, is there a doctor in the house? And a couple of people hopped up. I said, come. And then somebody called, whatever you called them in those days, the
Right.
ambulance people.
Right.
And they worked on him for a few minutes. And one of them looked up at me. I was obviously the next guy, and he said, he's dead. And I said, oh, okay. So they put him on the Stokes litter and rolled him towards the door. And as he got to the side door on the other side, I'm thinking, you have a meeting to hold. There's 5,000 people here. What do you do? And I said, ladies and gentlemen, I had lunch today with Ern Westmore. He was taking nitroglycerin pills. It's obvious that his heart was a problem. And as he told me it was. And I asked him, I said, Ern, uh, if you had to go while he was taking the pills, I said, how would you like to go? He said, on stage in front of a large audience, talking to the women about beauty and fashion. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, he's had his wish. Let's give Ern one last standing ovation. And they did, almost tore the place down. The management told me later, it was at the Park Sheraton Hotel in New York. Management told me later they could hear it out in the lobby. People were turning around, what's that? They roared and screamed and stomped their feet. And he went out. Now I'm thinking, oh, back to me. Well, we had a script, 37 minutes. You're supposed to know it word for word. I said to the audience, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben Gay. I'm a general distributor with Holiday Magic Cosmetics, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special meeting, the first 30 seconds of the 37 minutes. And I went right into the standard presentation, drew the circles on the board and everything. In a group, we had 5,000 people, about 2,500 were probably already distributors, 2,500 were probably prospects. In a size that large, where not all the distributors were great closers, we probably get 30–40% to put up, adjusted for inflation, $25,000 to join the business. It was actually 2,500 back then. And some would put up $50,000, $5,000 back then. Our closing rate that night in the room was almost 80%. It was the largest group close percentage I've ever had. So I've told many people over the years, kiddingly, uh, if you're ever in a situation where you can do it, get a famous person to introduce you and have him or her promise to die right at the end of the introduction, because the closing rate went from 40% to almost 80%, double.
They were on an emotional roller coaster. It's almost unfair.
Yeah,
It really is.
it
Uh,
is.
you
But
could have
the
sold
script
them
saved me.
Glengarry, Glen Ross lots in Florida,
Almost anything at that moment. It
right?
was it was a man, and I don't mean to make light of it because Ern was a wonderful
Right.
guy, although we were only friends for about 8 hours from lunch to when he introduced me. But it created an emotional thing that you just would. Your original question, not original, but the most recent question was, if they die on you, which is what reminded me of that story. If they die on you, what do you do? Rob, I've gotten in the early days, I'm sure they did, and I've blotted it from my memory, but I've gotten the introduction so finely tuned, the opening jokes, being there first, welcome into the room, talking to friends down so good that I have, sometimes the reaction to the Ben Gay thing is a 10, sometimes it's an 8. Well, I can work with an 8. Most people go through their entire lives speaking and never have an 8 experience.
Right.
So I can work with that. I just haven't had the nightmares.
Hey, Ben, what do you do? I got everything set on this right now, but I know it's a natural instinct of mine. So I'm coming to you like a therapist. You're my therapist right now, but
I,
I'm good. I've got so many tricks up my sleeve, but what I have to watch out for, and I think it's the competitor in me, is that when an audience just won't come around, they're just not giving me what I'm looking for. I have to watch out that I don't get a little bit ornery. I get a little angry
man,
at them. And I never call them names, but I'll sort of snipe them. Most audiences would laugh at that, but you haven't laughed at anything in 2 hours, so why would you laugh now? And keep moving. And you want to see an audience turn on you? Go ahead and start making fun of them. How do you keep from overreacting for me and some others, because I think it's an instinct. We don't do it intentionally. It just, you can start getting angry about it. And I don't want to be
yeah,
angry about it.
no, I understand. I wish I could give you some clever answer, Rob, but I'm telling you because I do the set the table workup stuff up front. I don't experience that. Some are
Right.
better than others. Some are easier than others. I do a lot of self-deprecating humor. If you're up talking and belch, I know how to not belch right into the microphone. But
Right.
but if I do, I have belch jokes. Oh, that was classy. I'm sure you're impressed with that, and
Right.
so on.
Right.
And I plunge on. The
But
only thing I've had to do, as I alluded to earlier, is realize that some of the younger people don't have the same references as I do.
yeah.
So I've had to add how you react when they don't
Yeah.
know. I used to talk about Roy Rogers, the great cowboy star. My father sold him his ranch in Apple Valley, California, where we lived briefly when I was a young boy, 6 years old. And I've had some people look at me like, who is Roy Rogers?
Right.
So I have to say, okay, I've just found out how old you are.
Right.
When I was growing up, you were either Roy Rogers or Gene Autry. You
Right.
couldn't be both.
Right. Right.
Then you have to explain who Gene Autry
Right.
is.
Right. Right.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was his biggest money-making thing other than real estate investments.
Didn't he also own the California Angels at one point?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
He was a very wealthy man, much
Yeah.
richer than Roy Rogers,
Right.
but Roy Rogers was more popular.
Right.
But when I refer to Roy or tell a Roy story, I stop, and now I've made it a routine. I've explained to him who Bob Hope is. I've explained to him who Roy Rogers is. I've
Right.
explained that we come from two different eras, but the good news is selling hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Technology has changed. They're smarter than they used to be because they can go on Google and before you get to their office or get to the stage or whatever, they already know as much as you do about the product or service. If they choose to find out,
Right.
they can.
Right.
So
Right.
that's changed. But when the dust settles, the silk traders going from the Orient to Europe uh, that had to answer one question. The Yankee traders riding on horseback in New England 200 and 300 years ago had to answer one question. The question always is, what's in it for me?
Whiff him.
And yeah,
Yeah.
they listen to WIIFM.
Right.
What's in it for me? And if you got an audience with their arms crossed, I've had a lot of those. I didn't
Yeah.
want to be at this meeting,
Right.
but they made me come. And then I look over the audience and I say, a lot of you don't look like you're thrilled to be here. Some of you won a contest to get here, and others of you were forced to be here. I got that. I've been to a lot of meetings I didn't want to go to either.
Well, you know
But
something, Ben, if I can cut in on this for a second, because you and I have very similar audiences. Ben and I, I write sales books. I've talked to sales groups. Uh, I respect an audience of salespeople that don't want to be there. Okay.
sure,
Because remember, they're sitting there going, I want to be in the field doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
right.
And until I get to know this guy, Ben Gay the third or Rob Jolles, whoever, you're keeping me from doing my work. So, in a sense, I respect the fact that that's where they're coming in. Now we turn to a pro like you and we say, as long as we know, I'm going to start hot. I'm going to meet you when you come in. I'm going to hit that whiff 'em. It won't take me an hour to get to the whiff 'em. It's going to come real fast,
Yeah,
and we'll take care of it. One other thing I wanted to just nudge a little bit. When I tell you, as my therapist, that I need a little help not getting angry, I don't know if you do these. I still do 1 and 2 day workshops. So
yeah,
when you're strapped to an audience for 2 days and they're not giving you anything, I don't lose it in the first hour or two. Well, coming into the afternoon, I really have to sort of talk to myself and go, they're doing it the best they can. You got to just keep plugging along. But I speak to the trainers who are listening right now, the corporate trainers. I think those are the ones we have to watch out for because it's easy to get upset in an audience, and that's never going to work for the speaker.
no, it would be like yelling at a customer in his office.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
How's that going to work for you?
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. I
But
do want
fair,
you to know, Ben, I didn't put a clock up on you because you were presentation royalty. We don't put clocks up on presentation royalty. Okay.
well, thank
So
you.
I've got to bring this in for a landing, but I would love to have you back on at another time and we'll continue. I'll tell you some of the things I pulled from you today. First of all, I'm a video guy, but to really script out that beginning, and learn it so it doesn't sound like a script, but really understand. Not only will that be more effective, it'll bring down particularly for new speakers, it'll reduce your anxiety a little bit. The first couple minutes are the toughest. Well, we got that already polished, ready to
Yep.
go. We're going to meet that group before they come in. We're not going to overreact like Rob Jolles does occasionally. Okay. We're always going to, I don't want to forget this one. Okay, it's not the greatest audience. They can't all be tens. We're just gonna roll up our sleeves and work a little harder that day. And I think if we do that, we're great. How do people get a hold of you, Ben?
Well, probably the easiest way is email. I'm an email person.
Yep.
We're dying off too, but I'm an email person. Shoot me an email if you're interested in coaching or
Yep. What's that
consulting.
email address? I'll put it up on the website, but what's that address?
BFG3, the number 3F BFG3 at directcon. It's short for direct connect, directcon.net, NET. And I'll get right back to you. Do me a favor and put in the subject line something that'll catch my attention: seminars, coaching, something, because I get about I'm sure you do, three or
Yep.
400 emails a day,
Yeah.
most of which go delete, delete, delete,
Right.
delete.
Right.
So catch my attention.
Right. Right. You can
And
put in the subject line. Jolles can't control himself when he gets when his audiences don't like him. Ben will know what we're talking. Where it came.
I'll know what it came from.
Either that or put Henry, Henry, Henry in the subject line. Both of those will get Ben Gay the Third's attention. Ben, always enjoy talking to you. I hope you don't mind me wrestling you, because you are a wealth of knowledge of selling, but never forget you are a wealth of knowledge on delivery, and that's what I really wanted to tune in. I still learn from you, my friend, not just from these, but I learned from you from having to follow you a few times. You're a guy I never forgot. I'm so grateful to have had you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. For more resources and to connect with Rob, visit thepresentationwhisperer.com.